All right, this is a little bit of an unusual Mother's Day video for those of you that are going to be seeing the class and our lesson by video. This is Dr. Roger Martin. He's one of my heroes of the faith. He was one of my seminary professors, and he and his wife Joy have been longtime members of our Sunday school class. And every once in a while, when they're able to come to class, we like to have him to step in and speak for a little bit. So he's going to open the class with a little bit of sharing some of the things that are going on in his life now and some of the things that the Lord has shown him through those testings and struggles. And so he's going to take the first part, and then we're going to do a few things to honor the mothers on Mother's Day. Dr. Martin, just talk to the camera right in front of you. You don't need to scoot up. You're good. All right, go ahead.
Well, I am glad to be here. In fact, the last time that I heard Dr. Robertson speak, he said, "I'm very glad to be here tonight. As a matter of fact, I'm glad to be anywhere." Well, sometimes I feel that way myself. But I am glad to be here just to share a few things with you about a road that I'm traveling right now and I don't want to be somber or in any way negative, anything of that nature. But a short time ago, I learned that I did have pancreatic cancer. And the options considered were several. And the one that I accepted on that, and at the request of the doctor, he said, "I think you best go this way. It's just to wait this out." And so I know that there's going to be an end, some weeks or some months. But, one of the things that in the scripture that's always been a blessing to me is that verse that I will not be afraid of evil tidings. My heart is fixed, trusting in the Lord. And one of the great blessings that I had when I learned that was that all of my children were there, and Joy was there. And I was greatly blessed just to see the great support that they were giving and the great concern that they showed. We've always had a closely knit family, but this has brought us together in a way that we didn't have before. It's just a different level, and I greatly appreciated that. There were a good many tears. I didn't have any tears. I knew what the options were, but I didn't have any tears, but the doctor that we've known for years broke down, and the nurse broke down, came over and gave me a hug, and that time was a time of great blessing to me, and I'll always treasure that moment, and I look back on it as a high point. But now traveling this, it's either, weeks or maybe months, but then to be with the Lord. But that's something to look forward to. And so many people are afraid of death, but we know that that's going to be a certainty unless we go up in the rapture or unless something happens in the meantime that that would stay that, like for the mention of the fact of when the time that I have, and I don't know how much time that is. But just to look at that and see, well, God knows all about this, and He's aware of this. He may have decreed this. He certainly allowed this, and there's a reason for that. And just to look at God and to see what He has to say and realize that our times are in His hands. Just a couple of things that I could pass on. One is I often get a question because I've conducted a number of funerals over the years and talked with people on their deathbed, and they ask the question, is it right to cry? And one lady that I especially familiar with, a young lady, and she had lost a baby, and her parents were coming to see her, and they were not good Christians, and she wanted to be a good testimony. And she said, "Is it ever right to cry?" And I said, "Well, Debbie, of course it is. That's not a sign of weakness, that's a sign of humanness. And let's consider some things. Jesus on 3 separate occasions cried. He cried when he looked out over Jerusalem and saw the people were not following him, and he cried over Jerusalem. And also at the grave of Lazarus, he cried and shed tears, told that Jesus wept. And then also in the book of Hebrews, we were told that Jesus had strong crying and tears in awaiting the fact of his going on for crucifixion and the pain that he was going to be suffering. And you consider all of those things. And when you consider those things, it puts things in a different perspective. And that's one thing that you see is a different perspective when it comes to death, because you're going to be with the Lord. God knows about all of these things, and God has a purpose. We don't always know what that purpose is. Sometimes we know it right away. When I had depression some years ago, a severe depression, back in 1988, I wondered why that was the case. And I thought life was over at that time. But God had a purpose there. And I have been able to help a good many people, with the Lord's help, of course, who've had depression that I've been able to counsel with and help. And I recognize that that's something that God has used in a way that I never anticipated. And this situation now is something that I didn't anticipate, but I know that God has a purpose in all things. And the fact that he does care for us, we're a part of his intercession as Christians. He wants to be near us, and he's certainly concerned about us. And these are things that I have learned in a new way. I knew these things I've been preaching them all of these years, but now I began to experience some of these things. And I had one person come to me in a matter of depression years ago, and he was one of the officials at Temple. And he said, I can't tell this to anybody, and I would not talk to anyone who had not gone through this, because they wouldn't understand. And I was able to help him and a good many others calling long distance over the years. And God has a purpose in this. However long my life shall last, that's in God's hands, and looking at it in a positive way. Not being negative, not being bitter, not being in a state of despair, but trusting in God and looking to him to take care of us. And that's basically what I had to say.
Wow. Okay. Well, thank you, Dr. Martin. I'm going to move the computer back so you can stand up, and then I'll help you get over to your chair. And, okay. All right. Hang on. Chariot coming.
And keep up a sense of humor as much as you can.
I should have turned around the.
I think he'll be okay.
Okay. I should have turned the camera around and showed the chariot on the. Maybe I will. Wait a minute. Hang on. Let's see. I'm going to get full disclosure here. Okay. There's the chariot. And you look so comfortable. I think I'm just going to sit in the chair like you did. I just may have to start sitting down from now on.
And by the way, always, as much as possible, stay positive.
Okay.
That situation and any other situation, knowing that God's in control.
Like the little girl said in Sunday school, she learned, her father said, what did you learn in Sunday school? She said, I learned that God never has to say, oops.
Okay, done. What?
Turn the camera around.
Oh, okay. Okay, all right. Equal time here. This is Joy Martin, his wife, and there's his daughters on the front row. And I'll tell you what, I said this to them, so I'm not pulling this out. They take awesome care of their parents, and their parents agree with that too. And when I'm down to visit them, they are always telling me everything that you all do, taking them to their scheduling and taking them to their appointments, fixing the meals, bringing them in sometimes. And I thought, that's going to be dangerous, this smell of this delicious food coming in. But they haven't been mugged yet. So, well, this is Mother's Day, and I do this every year, and I'll keep doing it. I made a plaque for my mom years ago. I'm not a carver like my dad, but I'm pretty good with wood burning, and actually just got a new wood burning tool. And so I made this as a tribute to my mom and gave it to her. Looks like I gave it to her on May 14th of 2000. And it's called Lessons from Mom. And I put a heart in the middle with a cross in the center because my mom had such a heart for the Lord. And then also she had a heart for souls and prayer. And she had a giving and a sharing heart. Some people bring stray dogs home or cats. My mom brought people home. And she'd bring people home from work, and my dad would go, "Who is that?" I said, "I don't know. Mom just brought her home for supper." So, and she would, encourage people. And then her most famous saying was, "Don't quit." I mean, she got down to my sister's face in nursing school, and, "You can't quit. We spent a lot of money." Well, that wasn't what it was all about. It was about not quitting. So, but then also, Linda Redding sent me some sayings that, little kids, they're just great. Some of the famous sayings about mom, why God made moms, second grade children. She's the only one who knows where the Scotch tape is. Mostly to clean the house, to help us out of there when we were getting born. That's true. That's true. Mom helped us out when we were getting born. Let's see. How did God make mothers? He used dirt just like for the rest of us. One of them said magic plus superpowers and a lot of stirring. Okay. God made my mom just the same like he made me. He just used bigger parts. What ingredients are mothers made of? God made mothers out of clouds and angel hair and everything nice in the world and one dab of mean. Okay. They had to get their start from men's bones. Then they mostly used string, I think. They got the bone part right? They know the Bible. Why did God give your mother and not give you your mother and not some other mom? And the first answer is because we're related. Okay. I heard somebody say one time I was born in a hospital so I could be near my mom. Number 2, God knew that she likes me a lot more than other people's moms like me. And then one says, my mom, what kind of a little girl was your mom? That's an interesting question. My mom has always been my mom, and she was never a little girl. And my mom has always been my mom and none of that other stuff. I don't know because I wasn't there, but my guess would be she was pretty bossy when she was little. They say she used to be nice. Oh boy. I wonder if these children are still alive. I'm not sure. Let's see. What did mom need to know about dad before she married him? His last name. She had to know his background. Like, is he a crook? Does he get drunk on beer? Okay. Does he make at least $800 a year? Did he say no to drugs and yes to chores? No wonder Art Linkletter had his show. This is good stuff. Why did your mom marry your dad? My dad makes the best spaghetti in the world, and my mom eats a lot. She got too old to do anything else with him, so he married her. My grandma says that mom didn't have her thinking cap on. Who's the boss at your house? I hope I can read all these. Let's see if I got all of them. Linda, thank you. These are really good. Who's the boss at your house? Mom doesn't want to be the boss, but she has to because Dad's such a goofball. Okay. Mom is the boss. You can tell by room inspection. She sees the stuff under the bed. I guess my mom is the boss, but only because she has a lot more to do than Dad. What's the difference between moms and dads? Let's see. Moms work at work and work at home, and dads just work at work. Moms know how to talk to teachers without scaring them. Oh, these are good. Dads are taller and stronger, but moms have all the real power, because that's who you got to ask if you want to sleep over at your friend's house. Moms have magic. They make you feel better without medicine. What does your mom do in her spare time? Mothers don't have spare time. To hear her tell it, she pays bills all the day. What would it take to make your mom perfect? On the inside, she's already perfect. Outside, I think some kind of plastic surgery. What does it take? What would it take to make your mom perfect? A diet? Oh no, that's what it says. You know, her hair. I diet, maybe blue. So it wasn't a food diet like we were thinking. If you would change one thing about your mom, what would it be? She has this weird thing about me keeping my room clean. I'd get rid of that. And then, let's see. I'd make my mom smarter. Then she would know it was my sister who did it and not me. Let's see. I would like for her to get rid of those invisible eyes in the back of her head. So, all right. Thank you to Linda for that. Very good. And none of those were from her children, I'm sure. All right, Proverbs 31. By the way, this evening at sundown, I told you last Sunday at sundown started Yom HaShoah, which was Holocaust Remembrance Day in Israel. This evening, we were looking at, Don had up the Wailing Wall, and nobody's there. There's a bunch of seats in the background, and they're preparing because it's going on sundown. Sundown tonight starts Yom HaZikaron, which was Israeli Memorial Day for military vets and also for anyone who's died at the hand of terrorists. They don't have a general Memorial Day like we do. They're honoring the soldiers that have died from 1948 on when they retook the land, and then anyone who's died at the hand of terrorists. So that's what they're doing, and that's why the Wailing Wall is so bare. It's not quite sundown yet. Verses 10 to 12, it's interesting. The beginning of this passage is really affirming words to a woman, to a mom. An excellent wife who can find. She is far more precious than jewels. The heart of her husband trusts in her, and he will have no lack of gain. She does him good and not harm all the days of her life. Such good things. And as I was reading this again this morning, it occurred to me that possibly the contents of those verses are why later on it says in verse 23, her husband is known in the gates. In other words, he's respected at the gates of the city when he sits among the elders of the land. The idea of that verse is that he goes in. I thought, why would he put that in the middle of this? Because I think it was partly listening to her and her wisdom, which he talks about in the other verses, maybe talking to her about decisions that they make. I think that the whole context of that verse being right in the middle of this whole passage about the woman, her business intelligence, her wisdom, her understanding, her hard work, her servant, is because the husband has gained some of his knowledge and wisdom from the time that they were together. So he starts out with an affirming statement, but then verses 13 to 19 and 24, you could describe it a lot of ways. It's a work ethic. It's work expertise. She buys land. She can go and buy land and do things wisely, that some things that in their culture you would have only considered a man qualified to do. But what I'd like you to do is, like I said in the email yesterday, as we're reading through these, let us know did your mom do that? Was that one of her characteristics or qualifications as your mom? She seeks wool and flax and works with willing hands. She's like the ships of a merchant. She brings her food from afar. She rises while it is yet night and provides food for her household and portions for her maidens. She considers a field and buys it. With the fruit of her hands, she plants a vineyard. Now, according to verse 15, I don't think that just means household maidens. Apparently, in the business that she is transacting, this clothing business, buying land, apparently she has some helpers, either helpers around the home or possibly workers that work with her, and she takes care of them also. She dresses herself with strength and makes her arms strong. She perceives that her merchandise is profitable, so she has business. She's an entrepreneur. Her lamp does not go out at night. She puts her hands to the distaff, and her hands hold the spindle. Excuse me. And then verse 24, she makes linen garments and sells them. She delivers sashes to the merchant. So that's a little bit about her work ethic, her work expertise. How many of you, your mom, I know they were all hardworking moms at home, but did your mom work outside of the home also? I know most every woman in here has worked outside of the home. So did your moms work outside of the home? Okay. Anything that you'd like to share about that or from these verses? That's what we're here for this morning. Don't make me tell all my mom's stories, okay? My mom worked at General Motors on an assembly line, and she had, that's where I got it, she had arthritis in her hands, and hers was all handwork. And this was before OSHA. And I'm sure that some of these things go back, some of the cancer that happened in my mom and in her sister came from some of the chemicals they were exposed to at work. But I remember they issued these cloth gloves, and you wore those cloth gloves when you touched the plastic wires, and all the wiring harnesses that are underneath the hood of your car back in those days were handmade. They would take a certain number of wires, bind them together, and then pass it on to the next person. And I remember her coming home with a brand new pair of gloves, and they had this cloth tape, and she would tape each finger of those gloves so that the coating on the wires wouldn't eat those gloves up in one day. Now, somebody should have said, whoa, wait a minute. There's something really bad wrong with that. If she taped those gloves up, a pair of gloves would last 2 to 3 days instead of one. I remember her doctor saying that it was a good thing she was working a hand job, moving her fingers, because if she wouldn't have, her arthritis would have been a whole lot worse. And that sticks in my mind, thinking about my mom working outside of the home and then coming home and, getting dinner and taking care of things. Anyhow, anything you'd like to say about your mom's working outside of the home or working in the home?
My
Joanne?
mother managed the bookstore, and that was during the war, and Joy was little, so Mother would ride her bike to the bookstore, and Joy would ride her tricycle.
Oh, cool. Wow. The bookstore at the camp? No,
No, the
No.
bookstore in town.
in town.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I'm thinking of Bill Rice Ranch. No,
No,
that's
yeah,
something
yeah.
different. Okay. A bookstore in town.
Yeah.
Okay. Where did you all live? Wheaton?
Waiting.
Okay. Oh, wow. So that was a pretty busy bookstore because they had the college there and everything, huh?
And
Sometimes
Mother-
professors would ask her
Yeah.
advice about a certain book. And she, because she was a very intelligent person, she had graduated from,
Baylor.
Decatur Baptist, and then
Baylor.
Baylor.
Okay. Wow. So they asked her advice on the books,
She
huh?
went to seminary with Daddy. She didn't pay to go, but she just studied everything he studied.
Oh, is that right?
And
Okay.
when she did pay to go, she got better grades than Daddy.
Yikes. Mom beat dad.
By the way, if I may interject, that was in Hebrew.
It was in Hebrew. Okay. Okay. All right. Well, everybody knows your dad, John R. Rice, and who would have known that Mom beat him in the classes at Baylor? Did he go to Baylor too?
yeah,
Okay.
they both graduated from Baylor. And
Okay.
he graduated from Decatur Baptist College.
Okay. Interesting. Oh, all right. Anybody else like to share something about their mom working? Johnny?
My mother worked as a legal secretary most of her adult life. There were a few years she worked as church secretary. But I remember when I was young, if I was sick or some issue where we were staying, I remember one time I fell off a bicycle and cut my lip and stuff. She came home. They didn't keep her at work. She was family first, and she would come home and take care of us. That's what I remember. She was a hard worker, but she was a mother.
And you all took care of Mom at your house for how many years?
5.
Okay. And well, before that, she would come and visit some, but then and she was a member of our Sunday school class for those 5 years, and we always were wondering what kind of hat she was going to wear every week because she had these cool hats. And she didn't always come in a wheelchair, though. That was toward the
She
end.
started out just normal,
Right.
but as the years went on, the cancer took over her body, and she was in a walker, then in a wheelchair, But she loved coming to Grace. She
And we loved
Sunday
having her
class.
too. I called her Mom. Yeah.
She loved the Sunday school class.
She was a great lady. All right. Anybody else? Amy?
When we first moved here, my mom had always worked in the bank since she was 19 years old. She could get a job. So when we first moved to Chattanooga, my grandparents lived 2 hours. And every Friday after the bank closed at 6, which they don't close at 6 anymore, she would come home, we would pack the car, we would go up to my grandparents for the weekend. So, it was like 7, 8, 9 o'clock. 7 o'clock if they didn't balance, 6 o'clock if they did balance. And we would go up there, and then we'd be there, and then she would come home on Sunday and get us all ready for church and the week and everything on Sunday afternoons, and Dad was working third shift, so she had to make sure he got some sleep and everything. And then my senior year in high school, when I fell and broke my leg and broke my ankle and dislocated it, she was at work, and it was like 2:30 and school was almost done, like at 3. And they called and they said, Linda, Amy's fallen. And she said, well, okay. Is she hurt? And they said, we've called an ambulance. And Mom immediately dropped the phone, got her keys, and as I was going to the hospital, she was coming this way. So then she turned around and met us. So, yes.
Okay. Mom took care of you. Okay. My mom taught me how to drive. Some people say that explains a lot, but no. She taught me how to drive. Dad said he couldn't handle it, and she taught me how to drive. And then I figured out why. When I needed the car, sometimes when I get into high school, if I needed the car, somebody would either pick her up and take her to work, or I'd have to get up real early in the morning and take her to work. And then I had to be back at the parking lot at Packard Electric, which was a division of General Motors. And within 30 minutes, they had like 8,000 people got off of work at the same time. So I'd be waiting there. And the only time I ever saw my mom run, she would run out to the car and jump in. She didn't even take the wheel. And she'd already taught me how to drive, but that was like my learning how to drive through Atlanta. And she said, go for it and don't let anybody in. And I'd be sweating and we'd get out of that parking lot and head for home. And that was the most stress that I had in high school, was driving my mom home from Packard. But, all right, anybody? Yes, Joy?
I could talk for a long time about my mother, but I want to talk about my mother-in-law. Because when Roger was an only child, and when she got old, I knew she needed to live with us. And that was an adjustment. But she was a wonderful, godly woman. And I said, she made the man I love. She's the one that invested in him. His father wasn't a Christian, but she was his faithful Christian who stayed close to the Lord. And I said, I have a ministry to this great woman who made my husband the man I love. And I would just encourage you to think that way about your mother-in-law, not think, oh no. And it was a privilege. She lived with us for 13 or 14 years. And of course, my children got to enjoy her chicken pie and her dumplings and her cakes and
Biscuits and curry and fried okra.
Well, when I see her, I'll thank her too, because of the part that Dr. Martin has had in my life. So I'll thank her too. All right, anybody else? Let's read on, and class is getting away, but this is all good. Let's read on verse 20. She opens her hand to the poor and reaches out her hands to the needy. She made preparations for that by these cloth things that she's doing, making things for different people. Remember Lydia in the New Testament, and so she was ministering and took some of the things that she made. It's really cool when every Christmas time when we get the things together and donate them to the Salvation Army. It's always special when people go and buy the things, make the effort to go and buy the things. But when I take those down, I always make sure to tell them that some of these things were handmade by Cindy, who also makes the quilts for the veterans. And there's just something about it. People get, we took some to Ukraine one time that some ladies from Grace had made. They had knitted some little newborn caps and matching blankets. And we went to a hospital, and we took some of them to an orphanage. And just to look at those, and we reflect that culturally in how we pray sometimes. How many times before a meal you hear somebody pray, bless the food and the hands that prepared it. And so that was this lady serving others with, and by the way, about every woman in here has served somebody in our class that had a need of food. And you've ministered to the point where sometimes we have to say, don't bring any more. And anytime we have a church dinner, we have enough and enough extra, even without Jesus showing up. So, you all do this, and your moms did that too. My mom was disappointed if she was cooking for any less than 8 or 10 people. It's just another meal, But I
had something here.
Yes, sir.
As far as Mrs. Rice is concerned, it's hard to ever be find humor in mother-in-law jokes.
No.
And this is what she would say to her daughters. Now, if you have a problem, any kind, you don't need to come running to me. But she would say to all of the husbands, she said, now if you have a problem, you be sure to come to me and we'll talk about that. Any problem in your marriage?
Oh, okay. So she was a counselor too, huh?
Yeah, she was.
A
But,
ma-
it was
A marriage
the married ones that came into the family.
marriage counselor
All the
too.
men.
Verses 18 to 20, she perceives that her merchandise is profitable. Her lamp does not go out tonight. I think those tie in again with this reaching out to other people. Her business was for the purpose of serving and helping others. There's some quotes that I'm going to give starting next week when we talk about following Jesus in the area of giving. Some interesting people that have made a lot of money and realized the biblical purpose for all the money that they've made was to help others. And this lady realized that the purpose of all of her work and her buying these materials and it was to serve her family. She took care of her family, but she took care of others. She's not afraid, verse 21, of snow for her household. And I think the specific there is that she was serving and helping other people, but she always took care of her household first. I've heard people say, mom or dad took care of everybody else's kids, but we hardly had anything. Not so with this lady. She took care of her own household. For all her household are clothed in scarlet. She makes bed coverings for herself. Her clothing is fine linen and purple. And then the verse I quoted earlier, her husband's known at the gates. She makes linen garments. By the way, some of these things have to do with sort of a higher level than common. When it says her children wearing scarlet, okay, that the symbolism there is they have pretty nice clothes. She says she makes bed coverings for herself. Her clothing is fine linen and purple. There's nothing wrong with God's people having something nice. I used to tell medical teams and teaching teams when we go to Ukraine, one of the biggest things that happened was we'd see how little people had and realize how much we had. And I said, the evil one will guilt you over what you got. You'll be miserable here in this country with how little these people have. But I said, there's no reason for you to be convicted about what you have unless you're not willing to share it. If you don't realize, like Pastor said about children this morning, that they don't belong to you. Nothing that I have is mine. And that means that if somebody else needs it, Lord, just tell me and I'll give it to them. That means I got to take good care of what I've got too. And this lady did this. She made fine things and she shared fine things with others. Strength and dignity are her clothing. Interesting, he's talking about clothing, then he says, above all the nice clothes she had on, strength and dignity were clothing her life. And she laughs at the time to come. Now that not only means that she's not worried about the times that are coming because she's prepared, but I think it has to do with laughing and a good sense of humor. Now, I remember that Mrs. Rice had a good sense of humor. I remember her squirting your dad with the hose when the roof of the house was on fire, and everybody just laughed and she kept doing it. Any other funny stories you remember from your moms?
Yeah, I've got one. It's a funny story. I was thinking about this earlier when you were telling the kid jokes, but I was probably about 7 or 8 years old. And I wasn't a dumb kid, but this one was something. And she was telling me a story about when she was a little girl, and I think it was like a yellow dress or something. And I just looked at her and I was like, I almost called her a liar, because, I did, but I mean, I did not believe her at all, the way she described that dress. She's like, what, everything was black and white.
She didn't wear any colorful things, huh?
And she had to explain to me like again, you know, I was a pretty smart kid, but this one just kind of never. There was never any occasion that it was addressed to me. Every picture I'd seen from her childhood, everything was black and white, and I just assumed that's how it was, you know. So.
So you didn't believe she had a colored dress, huh? Oh, well, it's interesting. He says she opens her mouth with wisdom, and the teaching of kindness is on her tongue. She looks well to the ways of her household and does not eat the bread of idleness. Everything, in just a few words, such affirming good things about her. The teaching of kindness is on her tongue. I tell, when I speak to teenagers, I tell them, you need to look for somebody, first of all, if God's going to give you a husband or a wife, it's probably going to be from among your group of friends. Okay? Make friends with someone, you'll find out what kind of person they really are. And I said, if people don't have any compassion on children and old people, forget them. And this is what he's talking about. This law of kindness is in her life. You see somebody who is compassionate on little kids, and they speak well of and they honor their grandparents. That's a kind, compassionate person, and they will be good to you also. And yeah, there, like Pastor said this morning, there are gnarly moments with the kids that, you know, you wondered why. My aunt said one time that if she would have had her third son first, she would have never had two more boys. And he turned out to be a doctor. He's a great guy. But boy, there was some, he put her through about 15 years of terrible. And it was her own fault. She spoiled him, okay? But anyhow, he's a great kid now. But the law of kindness was learned from Mom. But where was it learned? 5 or 6 verses before, when they saw her sharing, when they saw her taking care of people. You know, it's a good criticism of somebody to say they were too kind, and sometimes they got taken advantage of by people. But that's better than people being stingy, gnarly, and never helping out anybody. There's affirmation at the end of the passage too. Her children rise up and call her blessed. Her husband also, and he praises her. Many women have done excellently, but you surpass them all. Charm is deceitful and beauty is vain, but a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. Give her of the fruit of her hands, and let her works praise her in the gates. He ends with sort of like a blessing that is placed upon maybe his mom. I don't know, possibly, but in my Bible, verse 29 is in quotation marks. So it appears that this is something that he was saying to his mom also. All right, anything that you'd like to say, anything else about Mom to wrap things
I
up?
have a funny story about my mom.
Okay, Holly.
Growing up, there's six of us kids who went through a lot of milk. And sometimes we would get Mayfield milk if it was on sale, and that was my favorite milk. But a lot of times it would be the generic milk. And I went downstairs for breakfast one morning, and I was so happy to see a gallon of Mayfield milk in the fridge. And I poured it in my cereal, and I started eating my cereal. And Mom and Dad are sitting there eating their breakfast, and I'm like, Mom, what's wrong with this cereal? Is the cereal old? And she kind of smiled at me and started to laugh. And I had figured out that she had taken the store-bought milk and poured it into the Mayfield milk to see if I would notice the difference.
Oh! Wait, is there anything in here about deceit? Let's see.
She just really wanted to know if I really liked the Mayfield milk or if it was in my head. So after that, we got Mayfield milk.
Got Mayfield milk. Good trick, Joy. I like that. And if you can't afford it, you do what you have to. If it's up here, it's up here.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. We'll remember that for a while. Anybody else?
One of the things that you had mentioned is that where they can be kind to a fault, where people would end up taking advantage of them.
Right.
And that's Mom. She was kind to everybody. She was sweet, and there were times when people took advantage of her. And she never complained about that or anything, but she's always just loved people and poured into them.
And you got to hope, and in some cases you got to know that those people later on regretted that, and it had an impact on their life because they realized that you had been so kind to them and they didn't deserve it. But that's what grace is all about. The unconditional love of God is that we don't deserve His kindness. It's poured out totally on us. And so it's good. I think my mom was compassionate for people who were mistreated, because when she was younger, she was mistreated. And her father came to the Lord at the age of 70, and his life was completely flipped. And their relationship was too, and it was good. But I think she saw that other people had also been treated the same way, and she reached out to them in many cases. All right, anybody else like to share something before we close? Rick?
Yeah, my mom, I can remember her taking a complete Thanksgiving meal to these folks that were, I mean, they were dirt poor. They lived in what you call a sharecropper's house. And, you know, old Georgia, red dirt all around and no grass. But I can remember her, she made that whole meal and we took it to them, which was a good example. Plus my mom she was a little lady, and there was 5 of us guys and 1 girl. And she would go, she'd say, "You bunch of nerds, I'm gonna get my broom and take care of you all," when we got together.
Okay. Well, we're going to see him. We're going to see him. And we'll have a chance again to thank him. And good thing we can do is if we already thanked them and they went to heaven, it's good to keep talking about them and telling other people how awesome they were. I didn't have very long with my mother-in-law, but like you, Roger, we've talked about this before. If somebody wants to tell me a mother-in-law joke, I won't listen to them, but she was an awesome lady. And just a great lady, little short lady with daddy was 6'4", big tall judge, and she was great. Just a great lady. Loved her a lot. So, all right, let's pray. Father, thank you for your kindness to us in blessing us with godly women in our lives, godly mothers, for our sisters also. We pray that you will return to them the blessing today. If what I believe is true about the folks in heaven still being able to see the good things that are happening, then we are continuing to be a blessing to them by our living in the light of their testimony and their impact and influence. We love you and praise you and thank you for our moms and for our aunts and sisters and all the women that you've put into our lives. And pray that you'll help us, all of us, to be more like you so that others will see that Jesus is real and he's alive today in us. In his name we pray. Amen.